I'm Janeane. This is KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine, and standing by to join me is Renée K. Nicholson. We're going to talk about her new memoir and essays, Fierce and Delicate. The book is out now, and it's about the high-stakes world of professional ballet and also about living with chronic illness. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
How long have you been a dancer? All your life, since you're a little girl?
Since I was little, yeah. My mom enrolled me in dance classes when I was very young, and I just took to it, and that's what I wanted to do. That was it.
That was it. And
Yeah.
it's an incredible outlet.
It is an incredible outlet because it's both internal and external. You can really search yourself, on a soulful level through dance, but it's highly physical. So it's also outward, and in class you master the body, but on performance, and that's kind of more internal, but in performance it's for someone. So there's always that push and pull.
Was it always in your mind to write this book?
No. And in fact, for a long time, I resisted writing this book. So after I was no longer dancing, at the level that I was, I went, I was in school, and I was studying everything, and I took a creative writing class. And I really loved it. And when I first started writing, I wrote about anything but dancing. I just wasn't ready to go there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I started writing about dancing, I thought I would write fiction. I thought I would write a novel about dancers. And slowly I realized I had some things to say about my own experience. And that's kind of when things changed.
What was it that you were hesitant, you weren't ready to write?
I think part of it was my own grief. I didn't wear a lot of that grief on my sleeve. If you knew me at the time, you wouldn't think, oh, she's depressed about not dancing, or she's upset about not dancing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there was an element of that I just really wasn't ready for it to be my experience in me, although I still really love the art form. And so, I started to figure out how to write about movement by writing fictional characters. And then I was in graduate school, and I was encouraged to take a creative nonfiction workshop. And that's when I started to think, well, this is the thing I probably should be writing about. I'm writing about it in these other forms. I should, dip my toe in. And when I started, it was like I couldn't hold back anymore, right? That floodgate was open.
Yes.
And all of a sudden I was like, I have a lot to say. And I started thinking about things in a whole different way. And I realized you didn't have to be a famous dancer to be able to say something about that world.
Right.
And so that's it was very organic, I guess, in a lot of ways.
I love that. So it sounds like this book, really, you don't have to be a dancer to dive in.
No, and in fact, I'm always surprised how much the book resonates with non-dancers. It pleases me. A book like this kind of has an interesting balance because, you have to write it in a way that your colleagues in dance, know that you're actually a dancer, right? There are certain things that just sort of indicate that, but you also have this opportunity to share the world with people outside the form. But I really think anybody who's ever been really passionate about something kind of gets it, right? Or anybody who's dealt with an illness that maybe altered their life path gets it. And, some people just like to read about the lives of other people, which is a perfectly wonderful reason to read my book or any book, really.
Yeah.
You get to kind of walk through somebody else's life a little bit, and that's one of the joys, I think, of reading and writing, and the relationship between reading and writing.
Sure. So I don't know if you know this. I think you do. My show is called Get the Funk Out. So here you were in your funk. Why were you in a funk?
I think part of the reason I was in a funk is that I realized a lot of things can happen in your life that you don't have control over.
Mhm.
And I think, as human beings, we're sort of wired to want to control things, even though we don't really get a lot of say in how things happen. I mean, we've been living in a pandemic for a while here,
Right.
and none of us really had control of that.
None.
Right. And so, but this happens on a smaller level all the time. Right.
Mhm.
And I think it took a while just to understand that. Like, I was able to do some things that were healthy and useful, but it kind of takes a little bit to be to the point where I could look back, and I won't even say it was being able to objectively look back, to be able to look back and be excited about what I had done,
Yeah.
and to not feel so sad about it, but to like recognize like I had some amazing opportunities,
Mhm.
and they have shaped who I am now, even if I'm not actively dancing.
Right.
And so to me, that was,
Yeah.
I think that was maybe how I came out of the funk.
Yeah.
um, and sometimes you don't even recognize that you're in it.
No, you don't.
Right?
No, there's these little hints, but you're not really paying attention.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I have a sort of outwardly sunny disposition. If I'm upset about something, I don't necessarily wear that on my sleeve. And I think that's kind of where my funk lived, right? Kind
Yes.
of behind the scenes,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And so, to the world, I seemed just fine. And then in these moments, I was holding this thing. Um, and then as I started writing, I started letting go of that, right? It,
Sure.
it just sort of dissipated. Um,
Healthy.
yeah.
Very healthy. I was going to say, it sounds like, you were mourning the loss of not being able to continue to dance, of unfulfilled uh, dream of continuing as long as possible, but you
Yes.
weren't sitting back and being grateful for all that you had achieved up to that moment.
Yeah. And I think, the interesting thing about what happened, to me was I had always envisioned myself one way. And it was, you mourn a past self, but I also like became a new self.
Yeah.
And this awareness that you can be more than one thing, and you can love more than one thing, and that we have this multifacetedness to
Yeah.
us, right?
Right.
I started to see myself less as this or that, to seeing myself more on a continuum, right?
That's good.
And you kind of slide back and forth between things. And you know I didn't replace dancing with writing, right?
Right.
They became parallel to each other, right? There
Mhm.
were two things that I did, and that I learned and that I could be, and they could be separate, and they could also overlap, and all of
Yes.
that was okay.
Right. It is. I mean, think about the ageism associated with dancing.
Oh, absolutely.
So imagine you got to that place and then you were considered old. And really, you were young, right? But that's what happens. You reach what, 28, 30, and you're old.
Right. I mean, some dancers extend their careers past that, but many do not. And many find that they love dancing, but when it's your profession, it becomes something else, right?
Right.
And you lose maybe that underlying love, or it- maybe it's not even that it's lost, it's sort of more tarnished, right?
Right. Yeah.
And the older you get, you realize, there are things that you want. Right now I've been reading all these fascinating stories about dancers who are, because of the pandemic, able to have babies and be moms,
Oh, I
right?
love that.
Yeah. And it's, in some ways it's like kind of perfect timing for that, because
Right.
everybody's in a layoff of some sort.
Yes.
And to be able to have that like kind of in the middle of your dancing career is really quite extraordinary.
Sure is.
so out of something that's not so great has come this opportunity, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
um, so that's been really, really interesting for me to kind of follow, because that was definitely not the case when when I was going through. You
of
mean,
course. Right,
you had babies after your performing career, or
right,
a few
yeah,
people were able to manage that, but that was considered, the exception, not the rule.
right.
So um,
It's been a tremendous time of introspection and growth and realizing that you can kind of pivot and do other things to stay resilient.
yeah,
Really essential,
absolutely.
you know?
And I think we're seeing it in a lot of different areas. And I think that stories that show how people change and grow over time,
Right.
allow people to envision that for themselves.
Yes,
At least that would be my hope.
yes. No, we didn't touch on, you were living with a chronic illness. At what age were you diagnosed?
21. So
Wow.
very, very early.
Yes.
Yeah, it was rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease. And the way that it presents, it was a little tricky to diagnose because your joints swell. And, as a dancer, that can happen, just injury and, you know,
Sure.
you know, pounding of the joints every day and that sort of
Exactly.
thing. So at first, I mean, it wasn't like I was like, oh, something's really wrong with me. I was like, oh, I'm getting injured all the time. What's
What's
happening?
going on? Yeah.
Yeah. So it started to present, then, but it took a little bit to figure out exactly what was going on. Um, and, with an autoimmune disease, once you go that route, and especially with rheumatoid arthritis, there are some very simple tests, blood tests, and other things that health professionals can do to help diagnose it, right?
Sure.
Um, but you have to be, kind of pointed in that
You
direction,
do.
right?
At least you're lost. Exactly. Did
Yeah.
you have to change your way of eating? Because I know it's one of the inflammatory diseases.
I had always had a fairly healthy diet, and a fairly balanced diet. So there were a few things that I did differently,
Mhm.
based on recommendations. Interestingly enough, one of the things that I did is I started drinking a lot more water.
Oh,
And as a dancer, I did drink a lot of water, but I also, because I was so go, go, go at the time, I was a bit of a Diet Coke junkie.
oh no, really?
Oh yeah, the caffeine. You know,
Yeah,
in the 80s and 90s, a lot of dancers were less healthy than I see a lot of the dancers that are coming up now. And I knew a lot of dancers that smoked to curb their appetite. I was not a smoker,
mhm,
but the caffeine was another, and I fell into that, and so
same.
I've pretty much cut those beverages out of my
That's
diet.
good because Diet Coke is not a good thing to put in your body.
No, it is definitely not.
Mhm.
But just I can tell now when my body feels hydrated or not. And I was so in tune with so many other things about my body as a dancer that it's a little extraordinary to me that something so simple as that is something that I understand now in a whole different way.
Sure. And one last question. What is narrative medicine? Because you build that into your writing, don't you?
Yes. So, narrative medicine came out of Columbia University, and there's this wonderful woman. Her name is Dr. Rita Sharon, and she is a general internist there and also a PhD in literature. And she started to realize that understanding stories and understanding patient stories had this, immediate and important overlap. And so narrative medicine is really the ability of doctors and patients and, other health professionals like nurses and occupational therapists and,
Mhm.
physical therapists to recognize, absorb, interpret, and then act on the stories of illness. And Dr. Sharon has a wonderful quote. She says, that illness unfolds in stories.
Makes sense.
And that, if we have that ability to narrate them, that there can be important therapeutic consequences of that.
Yes. Well, it
And
makes me think of how illness or trauma to your body can be stem from emotional, not just a physical injury. I know when my dad was sick, he had cancer, all of a sudden I had this shooting pain down my arm and I developed frozen shoulder because I originally years back was in a weightlifting class and I overdid it and I think I tore something, but the emotion I was carrying from the weight of what was coming was a lot.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. And it is, when I was 36, I had a total knee replacement. All the cartilage
Oh,
had just worn away,
yeah.
right? And I was recovering, and my father had come to visit me, and I was starting to feel better. And I was starting to feel better because I didn't have pain, and because I didn't have pain, my whole emotional state was more buoyant. And my father came to see me. He said, "You look like 5 years younger." Like, he hadn't seen me since the
Sure.
surgery, and that really, like, I was carrying that,
The
like,
weight.
on me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
your story makes complete sense to me.
I know it really resonates. Now, where can people find out more about you, Renee?
So they can find out about me on my website, which is reneenicholson.com.
Okay,
They can also find out about me. I direct the Humanities Center at West Virginia University. So just Humanities Center at WVU.edu.
fantastic. Well, congratulations on your book.
Thank you so much.
And I've really enjoyed getting to know you.